After e4, d5, pawn takes, queen takes, knight c3 attacks the queen. In previous videos we went through queen d8 and queen check also from the e file. We're going to go through queen a5 in this video, and there's going to be other videos because this is going to be a bit longer topic. The move now is knight f3, and in this video we're going to mostly focus on the bishop g4 pin. This is a typical move to develop the light square bishop, since the black player is willing to play this pawn, this c6 pawn, and the b7 pawn are going to be like a chain like this. So these pawns are going to be on duty when it comes to defending light squares on the queen side, and so the black player is releasing the bishop from the other side. But there are other variations which we'll also see. So after bishop g4, white immediately attacks the bishop. Now the bishop has two options, which are the popular ones, either bishop h5 or bishop takes knight. Other options would be like to go back any of the squares on the back diagonal, but that wouldn't make sense, since then we're going to keep developing. So let's go through bishop h5, keeping the pin. Now white continues with g4, so that's how we're going to be playing this, and that's how easy it's going to be to remember, because they're all forced moves. Now the bishop goes to g6, and now the key move to remember is b4. We're going to attack the queen, and the queen should not take the pawn, otherwise we're going to have a lead in development. It's going to be much better for white. White will have, let's see, bishop, queen takes pawn. White continues rook to b1, attacking the queen. The knight is defending the rook, and now the queen cannot really go to any of these two squares. Also, c4 is attacked by the bishop. d4 and e4 attacked by the two knights. f4 will run into the attack of the bishop when the pawn is removed, and then the whole game is becoming a joke because black has developed nothing. So after, let's say, queen a5, which is a move that doesn't lose the tempo at least, and it still preserves the queen the possibility to eventually at least try to go to d8 after c6 is played. The rook now takes the pawn in b7. White's development is almost complete. So we already have a rook in the 7th rank. Black is nowhere near castling. It's going to take this piece, the bishop, the knight to develop, and then also the pawn to release the bishop. It's going to take at least 4 moves for black to castle, and that means it's just not going to happen. So black now, oh, by the way, only has one move to save the queen, because white is threatening rook to b5, which wins the queen. The knight is protecting the rook, and where queen going to a light diagonal will allow the rook to take the knight with check, and there's the bishop attacking the queen. So the queen cannot go to a focus of the knight. Here there's a bishop, here there's a knight. So white is threatening that move, and the only way to stop it is a6. Protecting the square b5. Black will have to know this move, or will have to think very deeply about, will have seen this position to avoid this move, especially if you're playing a blitz game. There's going to be trouble for black. So any normal move like e6, whatever, any innocent move will just run into rook to b5. So after a6, only move, white continues with queen e2. And the idea is to, well, develop the queen. The bishop will be perfectly placed in g2, attacking this incredible diagonal. And also the queen is developing, going on the same file of the king and allowing knight e5 to be played. So after e6, knight e5 comes, attacking the bishop. But still, we like this knight here. And it depends on what black does. White position is something like +6, something like that, evaluated by the engine. Position is completely winning. And yeah, so let's just look at a bunch of, well, there's not much that black can do. Think about it. This rook can't really move. It will just get taken. Knight in c6 will be taken. Knight in d7 will be just silly, because we could even think of swapping and then playing bishop g2. It's going to be easy life for white. The normal ideas that come to mind are probably something like bishop b4, doubling the attack on the knight with the queen, putting more pressure on c3, or maybe bishop d6, attacking the knight further and developing the bishop, or even knight f6. They all look like normal moves. Let's see what happens after bishop to d6. White continues with knight c4, attacking the queen and the bishop. And so after queen c5, white continues to finish his development with bishop to g2. And the idea now, which by the way is unstoppable, is to play bishop a3. The bishop in a3 is protected by the knight, and it's going to come with a double attack on the bishop. The queen will have nowhere to go anyway. Even if the queen actually does move somewhere safe, it will be far from the action. We're going to have two attackers on d6. Yeah, so in a position evaluated +9, I think it's time to move on. So that's the idea. After bishop d6, that's the idea. So that's bad. Bishop b4 seems a reasonable move, double attack on the knight. But this is met by knight to c4, which is attacking the queen. And by the way, there's pressure of the rook on the bishop, so now the queen has to move. So where does the queen go? Well, the rook is attacking the bishop. So after, let's say, queen to c5 defending, white continues with the exact same plan as discussed before. Bishop g2, finishing development and also attacking the crucial c6 square with the idea of playing bishop a3 eventually. So if bishop takes knight, we're going to take back. And so, by the way, we're also attacking the bishop right now because then we have a threat of bishop takes rook. So let's say the queen goes to, when knight went to c3 to attack the queen, let's say the queen goes to g5, then we can take a free bishop. If the queen stays there to protect the bishop, we're still going to take it. And then the queen takes back, and then we won a piece. So back at this position, after knight c4, we said queen c5, and now we continue bishop g2. So we've mentioned the threats like rook takes and so on. Let's go through two different options, like a5 to support the bishop, and bishop takes knight. If bishop, just take back with this pawn, the only pawn, and now we're threatening bishop a3. So the computer here will give black the best move, knight f6, just to quickly finish development, and gives up the queen because there is no way to save the queen. White continues with bishop a3, and let's say if black tries, then queen g5, for example. It looks like the queen can actually get saved, but then rook to c7, there's an attack on the rook. The rook can't move anywhere, it will be taken, and also there's a threat of a skewer. Position is completely lost. So in this position, again, after queen c5 and bishop to g2, take, we're making that threat of bishop a3. What happens if the queen instead goes to e7? Just in case you doubt the queen actually has no escape. Then bishop a3 again. And so now the queen can go to d8 or maybe d7. If the queen goes to d7, knight b6 wins. The pawn cannot take the knight because rook takes queen, and the rook can't move because it just the knight's attacking the queen, and the knight's also winning the rook if the queen moves. So after instead of d7, queen to d8, now we take the knight. And now whichever piece takes, well, if rook takes, then bishop c6 checks, and then the bishop checks the other diagonal, so that's game over. And if instead it's the queen that takes the rook, then again check. Now there's a escape square, which is d8, but then queen check, and again these two bishops are doing an excellent job here, and after the king moves, we have a possibility to infiltrate. Back at this position, after knight c4, queen c5, bishop g2, we went through bishop takes, which is bad. What happens after pawn takes? You might wonder why, if considering that rook takes bishop comes with an attack on the black rook, but then pawn takes comes with an attack on the knight, so that could be a possibility. Well, now the move is knight to b5, double attack on the pawn in c7 with the fork, and black has no moves. Best move here for black, according to the engine, is knight to a6, puts more protection over c7, develops the knight, and white plays a3 and wins the bishop. So let's make a recap. Take, knight c3, queen a5, and now knight f3. We're looking at bishop g4 variation, we're attacking after bishop h5, g4, bishop goes back, and now the key move, b4. So we know we shouldn't take the pawn. I mean, black shouldn't take the pawn. So after queen b6, no reason for the queen to go into a square that can allow white to develop with tempo. So for example, well, b5 is taken by the knight, c5 by the pawn, d5 by the knight, the other knight, the pawn, and the pawn in h5 is attacking h5. g5 is attacked by the pawn developing, the bishop will be, developing, so that wins the tempo. So that's very silly. Any of these squares here basically taken. So after queen b6, white continues with bishop g2. White has three minor pieces developed and is one step away from castling. and it's putting already some pressure on b7, so this pawn in b4 will still not be able to be taken. So after c6, which is a move that reinforces the chain of pawns, a typical move, the Scandinavian, gives freedom to the queen to come back and allows the natural development of the knight in d7. White continues with rook to b1, and the idea to push b5 eventually. So black has to go on with development. He's not going to be able to develop this dark square bishop in fianchetto, so he has to do it with e6. So white continues with b5. The idea is simply to take the pawn. Black's best move now is queen to c7. Because, well, what else can black do? Taking the pawn here will come with an attack of the rook on the queen. If the queen takes back, that allows the white player to remove the knight, maybe h4, protecting the bishop, just an idea. And then the bishop and the rook will both be attacking this b2, b7 square and infiltrate. So best move is queen to c7. Well, anyway, you know that the idea is to take the pawn. So now this cannot be done without black just helping black develop the knight. So best move after queen c7 is castle, and now blacks continue with knight f6, developing pieces, and white continues with d3, finishing the development of the light square bishops. These are not random moves that we can like think, oh, are they going to happen? It's either they happen or our opponent is not playing. Like, he has to play e6 to get this bishop out, otherwise he's simply not getting the bishop out, and you continue the expansion and getting more space. He is going to play knight f6. If he doesn't, that means the knight is going to stay there, and knight h6 doesn't make sense because the knight doesn't have a future. So of course these moves will happen. If they don't, then even better. d3, and now the bishop has to develop. So let's look mainly two ideas of developing the dark bishop, either e7 or d6. Then we're going to finish this line. So after bishop e7, white continues with rook e1, finishing the development of the rook. And after castling, white places the knight in e5, so the rook is guarding the knight. Knight in e5 is sitting very comfortably, and white enjoys a dominant position where basically the idea here is that the rook is always defending this pawn and is ready to infiltrate in b7, and this is also putting more pressure over this situation, this conflict between b5 and c6, because this stops the development of the knight. If black wants to finish development like playing knight d7, it looks like a completely normal move. Then we can make use of this situation that we have purposely created of the massive attack on the light square. So let's say knight d7, we can take the pawn now and isolate the pawn and go for a favorable endgame. White has two pieces attacking c6 as well. So after the natural knight takes knight, it looks like it wins a piece, but it doesn't, because now we play knight to b5, attacking the queen. And now nothing stops us from taking the pawn. And well, we want to trap the rook, so queen b8 wouldn't be ideal. So after queen a5, keep the queen free, we can take the pawn. And then when the rook moves to b8, we can finally recapture the knight. Position is completely winning. Yeah, so white just dominates here, and it has this incredible passed pawn, which is defended. So let's say knight d5, for example. Normal moves now, this is not possible because this pawn in e6 is pinned. So if this knight is taken, then the bishop can be taken. So I don't know, something like bishop to d6 attacking the rook looks natural. The knight is pinned. Then simply bishop to d2 attacks the queen. So when the queen moves away from the fifth rank, then we can take the bishop. Queen can't go to c7, but we'll say bishop, I don't know, queen d8. Then whatever, knight takes bishop anyway, because then queen takes back. And then bishop f4 is putting the queen and rook on a position which is skewerable, and then the bishop is still defending the pawn together with the rook. So in this position, let's say another move that seems to be making sense is a knight to d7 attacking the rook. The rook just goes back to e1. And after knight to c5, which seems to finally be going for this pawn, this is just black playing some potential moves. It's not like these moves necessarily will happen, but the position is already quite dominant, so this is just how more or less to transition to a winning endgame. After knight c5, knight d4, and we have enough protection over b7. So after the last attempt of black to finally capture this pawn, white continues bishop a3, crucial move in this position. Best way to develop the bishop in such type of setup. And now if black takes with the rook, then we're going to win the exchange. If black takes with the knight, then simply bishop takes, and white is up a piece, because after queen takes, knight c6 forks two major pieces.